Hello, and welcome to the next installment of the 30-minute workout webinar series. My name is Angel Espinoza, and I'm an Autodesk infrastructure technical specialist. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Jeff Bartles and Alan Gilbert. In today's session, we will look at three-line profiles, how they stack up. Here we are. For those of you that are not familiar with the concept of the 30-minute workout webinar series, we attempt to address capabilities typically beyond the common need to know training. Because it's not possible to cover everything in training, this webinar series intends to show tips, tricks, and lesser known tools and features that some people never learn about or only do so after a great deal of use. This way you can make the most of your Autodesk investment. As far as ground rules, examples are typically abstract in nature to focus on the functionality. Once you learn how the capability works, of course, you can apply this in many different situations. We commonly start on time and end on time. We try to honor your valuable presence. If for some reason you're unable to watch the series live, know that all sessions are recorded, and anyone that registers for the session can view the recording at their convenience. This may also minimize your need to take notes. If you have any questions during the session, please type those in the question and answer pane. Jeff and Alan will do their best to answer as many questions as possible. I may address unanswered questions at the end as time allows. If we're unable to address all questions during the session, someone will get back to you with an answer. If you want to have a one-on-one follow-up call with one of us about a topic that was covered in a session, please type that in the chat pane. We always look forward to chatting with everyone. Now for today's agenda. We will begin by understanding the components necessary to successfully create and manage profiles and profile views. Three-line profiles are going to be a kind of a portion of that conversation. So we will be in Civil 3D for the entirety of the presentation portions. We will talk about the creation of alignments, and from alignments, we know that we can create two types of profiles, a surface profile and a design profile. And then in this case, also, we're going to be talking not only of a surface profile, but we're going to sample some offsets. And as part of that, I am going to create a convention here, just so that everyone's on the same page. We're going to use typical aeronautic and nautical terms, and the software uses this idea of plus, which typically means to the right. As we put in a distance that's positive, that will mean we're sampling, in this case, to the right of the alignment, which I may refer to as starboard, and I will also try to denote much of that data in green, as is again typical of these two images. And when we need to sample to the left of the alignment, we typically denote that with a negative value, and that will mean port and will commonly be reflected in red in some of these things. Now, I will just mention this idea of length. I'm going to ask the question now, length and with a question mark, but we're going to get into the specifics of that in just a moment. Now, some of you may be asking, three-line profiles, what is that? I've never heard of that. So this is an example of a three-line profile. Some areas of the world and some areas of the US require that a three-line profile be generated. Now, what that commonly is configured, how that is commonly configured is that we will sample along the alignment of, let's say, the center line of a road, and then separately, they will sample or create profiles for some distance to the right of the road and to the left of the road. Very commonly, that may be the edge of pavement or perhaps the top of curb. So this, and all of this is shown in a singular profile view within a singular sheet. Now, to manage all of this, we're going to be talking about profile views for sure. Now, profile view names comes into play, but more importantly, perhaps, is this idea of profile view styles. And then ultimately, as you can imagine here, it does matter if the alignment is going up station from left to right, then the right side of the road, perhaps is the lower side of this plan view, probably wants to be denoted with the lower portion of the profile up here. So in this case, the right side of the road would be the lower portion. But if the stationing is going from right to left, then maybe the right side of the road would be best depicted by the upper portion of the profile. So it does matter a great deal whether we're talking about right to left and left to right when we talk about profile view styles that generate the profile view themselves, and then profile label sets as they get applied to the profiles themselves. There are just a couple of things that everyone, whether you're creating three-line profiles or not, should understand. And again, this falls in the category of a tip that everyone should be aware of, and not just people that create these three-line profiles. So these will be the topics for today's conversation. As is typical of these webinars, we attempt to be as PowerPoint-free zone as possible, and I will be in product until the very end of our time together. So I'll go ahead and jump over into Civil 3D, and we will begin. Now, first, I'm going to share that this PDF here of this three-line profile is going to be the one that I'm going to use as an example. Now, a couple of things about this. I chose this particular one for a couple of reasons, not only for the fact that it has a three-line profile, but also, interestingly enough, as it turns out, if we notice the stationing here, this is station 100, and then this is station 200, and 300 and 400 in the profile. Likewise, the stationing along the alignment goes from right to left. That's not as common, perhaps, as this scenario, where the alignment stationing goes from left to right, and then the profile stationing goes from left to right. So if we can make out those numbers, that's 11, that's 12, that's 13, and 14. So again, the stationing going from left to right. This example we'll use because it's not only the opposite and three-line, but what are the ramifications of doing that? So back in Civil 3D, I'll jump over into the model space and we'll begin this conversation. Now, I'm going to use Project Explorer for just a moment to point out what's actually in this file. When I do so, we'll see that there is one alignment and there is one surface. That particular surface is called EG for existing ground, but if I come over here to the one alignment, we will see that it is alignment for A street. And already I've created some design profiles, right? They're saying that there's a little bit of a warning there that says my profiles extend beyond the limits of the actual alignment, and that's very common as we might be tying into other points beyond the alignment itself. But that's all that exists in this drawing at the moment. Again, one alignment, three design profiles, and it tells me very clearly that these are design profiles as a part of this file, and that's all there is. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, noting that I'm on the Home tab of the ribbon system, I'll come up here and choose the alignment. And most people are aware that Civil 3D gives us this contextual ribbon. So the ribbon has changed. Some of you may have noticed that. And it is now on, off the edge of the screen here, this other tab called Alignment A Street. And up pop up all the commands that pertain to and what I can do with an alignment. One of them is to create a surface profile. So I'll go ahead and initiate that, bringing up this Create Profile from Surface dialog box. So I only have one alignment, as I mentioned. I only have one surface, and if I wish to sample along that alignment to that surface, I very simply hit Add, and we can now see that that was added. It's dynamic, and it is an existing ground profile as it pertains to that surface. Now, very importantly, what we're going to do here is we're going to sample offset. So we want to make sure that that's toggled. And using the convention that I mentioned, we want to sample a certain distance to the right and to the left of that alignment. Now, positive values mean that I'm sampling to the right. So 15 feet to the right, I'm going to put in a comma there. And then I'm going to also sample negative 15 feet to sample to the left of that center line by the exact same amount. As soon as I hit Add, now I have 6 profiles, the 3 design profiles and the 3 existing ground profiles. One of them says, now it could confuse matters here because based on the naming convention, there's a dash 15, but that's positive, and then dash negative 15 being negative to the left of that location. So I'm very simply, and I could draw a profile, but I'm very simply going to hit OK just to create those, and the panorama is telling me the profiles used have been created. Excellent. So now what we're going to do back on the Home tab is we're going to create that profile view onto the screen. Now, most of you are probably familiar with this dialog box. And as a matter of fact, to get 3-line profiles, the only significant difference is this little checkbox right here. And as soon as I toggle it on or off, you'll notice that an extra pane will appear, an extra option. And this one's called stacked profiles. So we'll review that in just a moment. So we want to make sure that that's toggled and that it's also that will touch that particular pane as we toggle through this. Now, a couple of things. What alignment are we going to be working with? There's only the one. What's the profile view naming? There's the naming convention. I can come in here and change how these will get named. Perhaps I wish to start at profile view number 1, so I'll just change that one. But these would be the naming and the alignment it's working with. I can provide descriptions. And then there's a style that's going to be utilized. Now, because I've chosen show offsets, this one is really not going to matter at this point, because when we get to the other pane, we will be providing styles for each view individually. So we'll go ahead and choose next. Now on the next tab, I am going to change the start and stop station. Because I want a little bit more grid to the right and to the left of my alignment, I'm going to change this. So even though the alignment starts at 100, I'm going to start my grid, my profile grid at -25. So it's going to back up past 0 all the way into the -25 range. And then my positive range is going to go up to about 625, as this particular street length would work best with that sort of length. So it's certainly possible to accept the minimums. And by and large, I then typically get one grid square left and right and above and below. But I'm just going to change that to this user specified values. And I'll go ahead and choose next. Now, same thing here. In the case of the height, I'm not going to change it because I'm going to use the minimum and maximum values of these profiles. But again, knowing that the style will create typically an extra grid to the right and to the left, or in this case, above and below, to give myself that clearance. So on the profile view style, I'm not changing anything. I'm just going to go ahead and accept everything and hit next. Now, very importantly, this is the new option that appeared, the stacked profile. And this is the new pane that, unless that check mark is on, most people don't see. So let's explore this a little bit. One, it's going to ask me how many stacked profiles do we want or do we need? In our case, we want 3, but we can very simply increase the size. You can see as I do so, the previews will update, and it tells me over here exactly what that may look like. Now, separately, if this value is 0 there, what it's going to do, it's going to lay the grid of one on top of the grid of the other, so that the bottom of one aligns with exactly with the top of another. What I'm going to choose to do is, because basically I want the profiles to be closer together, and in essence they have to overlap by a certain amount, I'm going to put in a negative value here of -32, but I'll point out where and how that impacts the entire thing in the end. So I'll demonstrate what that -32 actually looks like. Now, very importantly, next is this idea of the styles that I mentioned. So it didn't matter what style I set up front, because now I'm setting up a style for every one of them. So it says the top view. What style do I want? Now, I'm going to start off by the typical, I'm going to call this top, left to right. And that's the naming convention here that I typically utilize. I'm going to use middle, left to right for the moment, and bottom, left to right. Now, this is different than what I'm actually going to need, but I want to demonstrate what happens when we switch perhaps from left to right to right to left. Okay, so I'm going to use left to right to begin with, left to right for the top, for the middle, for the bottom, and we will continue. Now here, we specify on this one which of the profiles will be displayed in which of the grids. So if I start with the middle, I want the center line to be shown for sure. I wish to draw that. And then the existing ground surface right there for sure. I'm going to expand this a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. So that one, those are the two I want on the middle. Now on the top, I've said I want to go from right to left. So the right to left, excuse me, I said from left to right. So from left to right, I want the left on top. So I'm going to put the left on top and the negative, which is also the left, on that top view. And then on the bottom view, I'm going to put on the right-hand side. So if we're going from right to left, that's would be the orientation. So again, on the bottom, I want the right view. So we'll choose the right design profile and the positive value here for the existing ground. And that's pretty much it. That's all I have to do. Now, for one of these, I am going to change and put in some label sets just to help to quickly identify my example. So over here under the labels for that center line, I'm going to create, and I'm going to use the 30-minute, not right to left, but this one will be left to right. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then lastly, we'll walk through. There's no more changes. There's no data bands. There's no hatch patterns that we're going to utilize. So we'll go ahead and say, create the profile view. And I'll use this little node here. Shift right click brings up the shortcuts. I'll use node, drop it on that node. And then it created then this 3-line profile as I understood it to be. And here's where some of that color coding that I created to help us understand. We can see that this is green, the bottom portion is green. That pertains to this bottom profile set, the pair. And then the middle ones here are white, which pertains to the middle. And then the top span is red, and that will pertain to the top. Now, I've created this style for these profiles where, similar to what was in the example here, the labels are inside on the grid and so forth. So I wanted that to match a little bit there. So that's why these labels are similar there. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. One, I mentioned the 32-foot overlap. So if I come here and I touch the top one, you can see where the top one ends. And if I touch this one here, if I just simply highlight over it, you can see where the bottom one ends, which is right about at this point right there. And that distance, that's the 32 feet from there to there. If we run a distance, that's the 32 feet overlap. So when I entered it as negative, they overlapped by that particular amount, right? And that's what's going to be necessary ultimately for my sheets to look correctly. Now, one more thing. If I were very simply to grab this profile and then change its style, so profile view, I'm going to edit the style of that profile. If all I were to do is to change, actually, I wish to do the middle one, sorry. I'm going to grab this middle one because that has labels as well, and change the style. If all I do there is change it from left to right here to right to left, right, and then hit OK, this will then flip from left to right now to right to left. But a couple of challenges arise in that scenario. One, notice the vertical labels are now outside of the grid. Additionally, the slopes, which were above the line, are now below the line. So that's one of the things that people have to understand, even if they only work in a single profile. If I change, and I'll do that again in reverse to show the impact of that. If I change from right to left, now back to left to right, and very simply hit OK, now these labels are inside the grid, and those slope labels are above the profile. So that's what's going to necessitate then for us to have separate profiles, styles for when I'm working left to right or right to left, and separate label styles for the profile when I'm working left to right and right to left. So I'll go ahead now, I'll come into this other drawing and kind of finish this idea, which is I wish to then do this all properly to begin with. I'm going to create, let's see, and I think if to prove the point here if I bring up Project Explorer, this one already has all the samplings and already ready, so I just need to create my profile views. So I'm going to go ahead and choose profile, create profile view singular, but because this is on, I'm going to create more than one stacked profile. I choose next. This style doesn't matter, right? Now I wish the same. I'm going to enter in negative 25 there and a positive 625 there, 625, and we'll choose next. And automatic is fine. We'll choose next. It's going to be 3, the negative 32 value there. Now I'm going to use the style that's appropriate for what I actually need and want, which is top right to left, middle right to left, bottom right to left. and then I'll choose next. What do I want to show in the middle? So we've gone through this already. So I choose the middle and the center line. On the top, now because we're going right to left, I want the positive values, meaning the starboard side of the road, right? So the positive 15 there and the right there. And then the bottom one down here, I want the left and the negative value. Don't let the little dash in between there confuse us. Now, additionally, just to show that this is all possible at this point, for that bottom, I want the label here to be which? 30-minute workout, right to left. And then in the middle, the middle will be this one. I want right to left. And then in the top, I want the right side to be right to left. Now, doing all of that, and I'll just walk through this. I said I could jump straight to create profile, but just as I walk through that, there were no bands, there was no hatching. We're at the end, we'll create profiles, and I'll pick that same node. So shift right click, node, and place it. And now, based on the styles, you'll notice that red being port, or the left side, is on the bottom, the white being the center, the green being starboard or right side is on top, and all the labels are in the correct placement, and also these labels are above the line. So that was necessary to have a separate style. In essence, that one wants to be below the line, but because we're going right to left, I have to put in a negative value so it ends up on top. So that being kind of the pro tip there that many people need to understand, even if they're only doing a single line profile. Now, another thing that could be confusing is I'm going to grab one of these and I'll look at the style. So I'm going to edit the profile view style and point out that for, let's say, the display of the left axis, let's go the left axis itself. Right now it is on, it's visible, and it's blue. But the left, what is typical of left? I'm going to say red for port, right? And then for the right axis, I'm going to choose, instead of blue, I'm going to choose green for starboard. And when I choose OK, what's going to happen is this one's green over here on the left, but green is for starboard, which means right. And this one's red over here. Why is that? Again, that's because we're working now right to left instead of the normal convention of left to right. So when you do that, again, this pro tip means you have to be aware that when you're working from right to left, the axes and everything else basically becomes backwards of what one would intend, right? So if I'm coming over here, everything looks correct because there's a different style when I'm working with this configuration, station up station from right to left. And if I'm working and I want to have the exact opposite, where my alignment is laid out from left to right, I have to have a different style for all of these scenarios so that these look correct in this scenario and they look correct in this scenario where this is that same portion of the alignment. So those are the requirements then for properly managing these things. The profiles, label sets, and the profile views need to be different when I'm dealing with right to left and left to right. Otherwise, the 3-line profiles can be created manually. These are all individual. If I choose the move command and I want less overlap or more overlap, and I'll just grab this and just slide it up, you can see that they're individual components and individual parts. And as a matter of fact, prior to that option being made available, people would just make a copy of one and then just show different sample profiles in them. But we can, and if I wanted to, I could line this up so that they're endpoint to endpoint. If that were the requirement, endpoint there to the endpoint there, or in the scenario that I want it not only there, I want it 32 feet, I'll type it in 32 feet lower so that there's that overlap. And this is closer. And the same thing here. We can grab that and move that from the endpoint to the endpoint. And then additionally move that 32 feet higher, 32 feet, and get that back to where I was and where everything lines up. So it is possible to do it manually, although the dialog box gets us through that process significantly more efficiently. Okay, so with that, that concludes my portion of the demonstration. I'll come back over here to the PowerPoint and see if there were additionally any questions. So we talked about the ability to sample offsets, rights and lefts, and then the naming, and then what happens when we create profile views from right to left versus left to right, and the same for profile label sets from right to left, left to right. And that's for everybody, even when you don't have those 3-line profiles. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any questions, gentlemen.
Hi, Angel. The one, just to confirm, I believe the gap distance is currently the only way to set that distance. You can't tie it to any other known value, like the distance between the profiles or anything. Is right currently just a manual setting, right? That gap between profile views.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, separately, as I mentioned, it is possible to create them all individually manually, but this is certainly a quicker way to get started and then make that fine-tune adjustment. Maybe my profile view on my sheet layout, if I come over, let's go back to the original sample. Maybe my profile view takes up more of the sheet, maybe if it comes down to this far, in which case the spacing up here I might need less of an overlap because I have more profile grid on my sheet. So that's certainly a possibility, and to show what it looks like over here. Right. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Nope. I think that's it, Angel.
Well, with that, I wish to point out that there are additional resources that if someone wanted to find out a little bit more about this, Jeff and Alan and Jerry Bartles have been creators of a blog called Civil Immersion. And then they also post their videos related to civil immersion on YouTube. And there's quite a number of videos that exist out there. And if you were to just look up civil immersion, you would get many of the videos here that pertain to this 30-minute workout and some additional videos from their blog. But also, if you look specifically for profiles, civil 3D 30-minute workouts, there are other videos, all 30 minutes long, that could help you look into some of the more interesting or detailed components that we just didn't have time to cover today. So if you wanted to have, there's certainly, just know that there's plenty of other assets that you can have at your disposal to get additional information. If you would like to get a follow-up call by one of us on today's topic, please state that in the chat window so that can be arranged. But on behalf of Alan Gilbert and Jeff Bartles and myself, I thank you for attending. We are super appreciative of your time. We hope that you found this time well spent, and we look forward to our next time we get together, which, by the way, happens to be in 3 weeks as we get through the next cycle. It'll be in 3 weeks. So thank you very much, and goodbye.